Hi, thank you, thank you. I'm just a very brief introduction to Harris and Drew, who are going to shepherd you through a truly wonderful conversation and a wonderful meal. So on behalf of Handshake and all the partners here, Rice, Gallup, West Health, and so many others, thank you so much. And as I was talking to Drew about, thank you so much for your commitment to brain health, both personally and professionally. It means a great deal to me. So enjoy the lunch, and please enjoy what will be a wonderful conversation.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for spending time in this really impressive environment. This is our second year being here, and what we've seen is that people come together in a different way when you come here. And as you've heard from the panels this morning and throughout this week, a lot of ideas happened last year that were put into action this year. And that's the exact goal here today, this week, is to continue to build on that action. And that's actually what makes this lunch so important, is this lunch is meant to be a working lunch. What we're trying to do is figure out how we take the genius of this brain economy and move it forward. So I'm not a doctor, but I've had so little sleep that I feel like a resident this week. But if you think of the medical model, it's see one, do one, teach one, right? And so if we think about how we bring this brain economy to life, we have to show people what good looks like so that they can go do it. And so that's the focus today. We have some great place-based initiatives that we're going to ask to be highlighted. But really what we want you to do is give us your input on how we build a blueprint so that we come out of this and are able to scale what you hear today, but spread what you hear today as well. And so each of you guys are going to have a role in this moving forward. So the lunch is free, but the work comes after it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Harris-Ayer, who's going to give us a little bit of context, and then we'll welcome Provost Dittmar to give some remarks as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. I'm just going to stand up so I can see who's in the room, so I can call some people out in the spirit of getting you guys to do the work. We're kind of still jet-lagged and feeling lazy, so the work goes to you guys. So I am the executive director of the Global Brain Economy Initiative, which is based at Rice and collaborative with the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative and UTMB. So we're the action platform for the brain economy. I have the slides here that McKinsey and WEF presented on the brain economy report this morning, but in the interest of time and not wanting death by PowerPoint for all of you, I just flipped to the end. If you haven't learned about the brain economy and the WEF McKinsey report yet, then you've missed out. But we don't have time to go into it now. So that's the top QR code. This action platform is the second QR code. So just check them out, casually as you're eating and listening to us. This is the Brain Economy Action Forum of WEF, which is another platform for organizations to come together, which in the action of that comes through our initiative. So that's the framing of the brain economy. The brain economy is really a highlight of this week. And then let me just say something else before I hand over to Amy to say some remarks. In the room, I'm going to go around and tell you the regional manifestations of the brain economy that are happening around the world. So the brain economy globally is awesome, but it's all about place. It's about people, communities. It's about country, which Cheryl will talk to a little bit about. That's what this is about. How do we fire up grassroots? How do we empower people, give people a sense of optimism and hope in their regional communities? So I'm just going to go around just to give you a flavor, and then I'm going to sit down, so you don't need to listen to me. We have representation from Australia, from Cheryl, who's going to talk about First Nations, the first First Nations brain economy program in the world, which is brilliant and backed by the Minderoo Foundation, which is a massive global philanthropy. So Cheryl Batchelor, thank you also for flying the furthest from around the world to be here. Cheryl will speak up later. We have representation from Canada. We have a big national Canadian strategy coming together. So thanks to friends who are there. I won't mention all of your names. Spain is in the house. RIM represents the Spanish work and also Catalonia. So you can choose which of the events you want to go to, Madrid or Barcelona with RIM. Pennsylvania is in the house as well. There's some great work coming led by Penn State University. California, big state-level California brain economy strategy requested by Cabinet Secretary of the Government of California, and now the Governor of California is on board. So Helen from UCLA and many others are here, Berkeley, et cetera, and many other companies. Kansas City is thinking about some things, so we're going to hope to fire them up. Who else can I call out? Europe, Fred is here to talk about European activities. There's a big European Brain Economy Summit in Brussels, May 5th. So Fred's going to talk about Europe writ large at a continental level. Africa, we have representation from Africa, where we're talking about firing up African activities. Houston, Texas is the first big city-level initiative in the world. So David Gow and others here. And then Geneva. We launched a Geneva Brain Economy Strategy. Erwin did on Monday night at the AI House. So that gives you a sense from Australia to Geneva and all those places in between. So yeah, thank you for being here and enjoy the food. And we keen to get your thoughts to figure out how to wire this all up together around the world. How do we help people feel empowered and keep this happening at a grassroots level that's coordinated? But Amy Dittmar, Provost of Rice University, please say some remarks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things. Rice is kind of this with Harris there, creating this nexus to bring all of this together. But I want to kind of come back to this place-based. And so to start it at a university, to build it into a city, to be catalyzed by a state. If you don't know, the state of Texas has just recently invested $3 billion in health and brain research, dementia research in particular, but broadly defined. And so it just shows how it's a snowball, since we're here in the mountains of snow. As a snowball starts running downhill, how much bigger it can get. And so as you're thinking about your place-based initiatives and reaching out, I would just, we're happy to talk about the model that we've used. It started with you were the tiny snowball, right? You were the start of it in so many ways. Pebble. But, it really kind of grows from there. And, I'm working as a co-chair with David to take that out to Houston, many of the other hospitals. But it's really not just about the brain health. I don't want to lose sight of the brain skills side. So we didn't go through the report, but again, brain health plus brain skills equals the brain capital. And we have to think of all of that, particularly at this time for AI. So this is for us to hear from you and to have a conversation. So I don't want to speak too long. I've had other opportunities to do that today. So I will turn it back over. Great, thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. So let's start with a few examples to get us thinking, right? Because brain skills plus brain capital equals the brain economy. So then when you bring that down to a local level, what does that actually look like? So I'm going to ask 4 people, and so we're going to go Erwin, because Erwin has to get down the road, Eleonora, and then over to David, and then Tim, who's our host today, Tim Lash. I'd like to ask you to talk about the California Master Plan on Aging. And what we're listening for here is kind of, what models can we pull out? So where's the funding come from? What's the governance look like? And what's the strategy? What's the shared vision that we can pull into our blueprint that makes these place-based initiatives move forward? So let's start with Erwin. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Drew, and thank you, Harris. It's great to be here. Was here last year, first time, and indeed, there's tremendous progress. My name is Erwin Bottinger. I'm the director of the Wyss Center for Bio-Neuroengineering in Geneva. I'm also a professor for artificial intelligence in human health, the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York City, where I've been on faculty for 30 years. And so we at the Wyss Center in Geneva, funded through philanthropic activity from the Wyss Foundation of Washington, D.C. We have a generous donation from Hans-Jörg Wyss and his foundation, and we apply it in the gap between academia and industry, between project and product. And so we have, over the last 3 years that I'm at the helm of the Wyss Center, focused very much on the mechanisms and the tools and the processes and the procedures that we need to put in place to effectively scout projects with our academic partners, like the EPFL. I saw Stephanie Lacour here, Vice President at EPFL, terrific technical university, powerhouse in AI, neurotechnology, So we are working with them. We're working with the University Medical Center in Geneva, AGG. We're working with the University of Geneva, all very strong in the space of neuro and psychiatry. We're scouting projects that have the potential within a set timeline and with a well-devised investment plan to make it to a prototype stage, project to prototype, that we can then spin off. And we have basically, therefore, made our name in Switzerland and beyond as a venture studio with deep translational research roots. So we have spun off 8 companies in the last 2 years, and it spans the gamut from AI, deep learning applied to better read and understand EEG. EEG, for Christ's sake, 100 years old technology that's still sort of the basis of much of diagnostics in neurology, right? But still, you know, we have not unlocked many of the secrets that are in the waves of the EEG, and AI is helping us with that. We have companies in that space. We have companies that we have invasive brain chip technology. It's a sensor that can be, with minimally invasive approach, placed in the brain to read out the intent to speak, to communicate, or the intent to move, and have it translated into actual communication or actual movement via machines. So this is brain-computer interface technology. And many more along those lines, because we believe that we can bring invasive, non-invasive neurotechnology, AI in particular, coming out of research projects. We help de-risk those projects, make them prototypes that investors and capital can then come in and apply money. Everything takes money, in particular when you start a new business with an exciting new product, to move that forward into startup and product. And why? Because in the first instance, yes, you know, we want to help people that are affected by disabling diseases, neurological and psychiatric diseases. But we have shifted in the context of the brain economy and brain capital paradigm, brain health and brain skills. We have shifted to applying these technologies into a very deliberate effort to think about human augmentation, because in the end, AI is advancing faster than the human brain. And we need to now focus, instead of building better chips and having better models and all of that. A lot of people are doing that are not here in this room, but believe me, they are doing that. A lot of people are focusing on improving machines. We, and hopefully this community, can focus on optimizing on the human brain and through human augmentation. And so in Geneva, we have a great ecosystem where we have our activity that can basically build the bridge between project and product for the purpose of enhancing human skill set, cognition, resilience, adaptability, decision-making, metacognition. We want to bring technology to this to allow us to increase brain capital from the individual, scaling to populations and communities, and also making it measurable, such that you guys from the economics sector, you have something to measure and can actually deliberately say there is good progress. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. That, you know, such impressive work. I think it would be impressive no matter what city it would be in. But the fact that it will be in Geneva, which really is the kind of the crossroads of global public health, that this really kind of sets a model that people will come and see and be able to take forward. You know, I think a great time to check in on the progress will be during the World Health Assembly in May. You know, so that comes quickly, but I think those are where some of the initial building blocks can be showcased. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for the Wyss Foundation for the commitment. So now, everybody, I hope, was amazed by Dan Buettner's presentation. I thought that was fantastic. And we would have not had Dan here if it wasn't for Eleonora, who leads Caring Kind, which is probably the most important Alzheimer's association in the United States and leads a lot of the work in New York, but is going to be across the United States. So Eleanor is pioneering a really interesting partnership with Dan, and so I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Sure, and I'm going to use my phone only because Dan mentioned that we do have a white paper that's actually being released, and unfortunately, one of the researchers that was joining me today got stuck in New York. So Eleanor Twinator-Mikesh, President and CEO of Caring Kind, been at Caring Kind actually for the last 6 years. Was also CEO of the Alzheimer's Association for the state of Connecticut, and a really big funder for a promoter and fundraiser for the Pointer study. So you'll see a trend that brain health and prevention has been something that I've been very passionate about. Prior to that, I ran healthcare systems in long-term care over 14 years and was a CEO across 3 states for long-term care. So really had a chance to work with dementia. We had several dementia units in all of our buildings. And so really hit the ground running once I went on into the nonprofit fundraising in terms of what were the gaps and what were the families needing. And Caring Kind has 3 pillars. We take care of family caregivers. We take care of people with the disease, all forms of dementia. And we have a new pillar, which is the worried well. Those that in this room have either had a parent or somebody in their family that has had Alzheimer's disease. And now, because Alzheimer's is becoming more prevalent, there are treatments, people are starting to worry about, what can I do to prevent this, even if I can prevent it for 2 years? And so I actually had brought Blue Zones as we were training our healthcare staff in the long-term care, as healthcare workers need motivation and things to really promote wellness in long-term care. As you know, particularly during COVID, it was really tough. During COVID, I lived in a COVID building for about a month, and I can tell you some of the Blue Zone pillars got us through, and my staff through, on how to get through the next day. And that was in Boston. So Caring Kind is New York City based, but we decided we wanted, as we learned that the Bronx, New York has the highest prevalence in the nation for dementia. And so we started working, again, pollination is my favorite word, working with government, working with policy holders, working with medical centers. Caring Kind, because it is one of the oldest charities in New York City, has a relationship with every ADRC medical center. In fact, we're hosting our very first medical conference on March 30th at the New York Academy of Medicine. And it's bringing together an interdisciplinary approach, which is a little different for clinicians, right? We all have our own conferences within discipline, but this is interdisciplinary, and it will get everybody at the seat of the table, which needs to happen. So the person with the disease is going to be staring at a neurologist, staring at a psychologist, staring at somebody who actually builds building for dementia units, and it's different. So why the Bronx? Heaviest prevalence, the Bronx, New York. How are we going to raise funds, and how are we going to think of a Blue Zone? I have to tell you, it took my board a really long time to say yes, like this is, not only to help fund a mini Blue Zone challenge, but to even consider, why not Blue Zone in New York City? Let's think big, let's do this, and how it's going to, in fact, change the trajectory of people and perhaps some prevention. And so we, one of the biggest things, obviously, and you see this in clinical trials, is trying to recruit diversity in any of your projects. And we have had difficult times in past. With this particular Blue Zone project, we partnered with a old friend in the Bronx, an organization called RAIN. They represent the Black and Brown community. They became our partner. They also became a client and wanted to see this themselves as somebody who's fighting diabetes as a young child. And the numbers made sense for them, and so they got behind it. We were able to, because this was a mini Blue Zone Challenge project. It's not the full-blown, which I hope that this white paper, as it's being released, we will be able to help fund a full Blue Zone project, and then I can retire. But we saw significant changes. We were able to recruit almost 100 people in less than 4 days, which is incredible for anybody that does recruitment, and it was 90% from the Black and Brown community. And we measured things like through the Blue Zone app, things like sleep and overall well-being, and how all of the Power 9 was through an app, which was incredibly easy for our constituents to use. And the significance of the challenge was grand. 48% of the 92 that actually filled out the survey lost 5 pounds. Participants noted improvements in physical activity, stress level, overall mood. 80% reporting an enhanced sense of well-being. New friendships were formed during this challenge, blossomed as community ties strengthened, and just to end with one inspiring voice, and this is not my terminology, but oftentimes the client said, people don't typically come into these types of communities. They don't work and give us these kinds of education. These aren't things that were taught for many of them as a child because they're coming from an underserved community. It was great to take on a leadership role in my community as somebody who represents an underserved community. In a low-income area where many face challenges, a sense of community outshines any negativity. This illustrates the power of collective action and shared purpose. And many of them, we held a post-conference, a diversity conference, and many of them are wanting to advocate for this grander New York City Blue Zone project, which clearly is something that we're advocating for. But I think I heard the word collaboration, and I heard the word community and Moais, and I think getting everybody at the seat at the table in different disciplines is how things get done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great presentation. A quick question before we go to David here. So source of funding, right? This is key, and we're thinking about the roadmap. So
Yes.
Source of funding, sounds like you had some initial funding for a seed project.
Correct.
Sounds like you're hoping that leads to more additional funds.
Correct.
What was the initial source of capital?
Yeah, so actually, one of our board members who's here, Megan Gill, if you just wave, because we knew the gaps in services, we knew that the real estate industry would have a real interest in these Blue Zone projects. And so, I was reinforced with the panel earlier today with JLL. And so that just reinforced. And this white paper is actually going to be the start of a launch for us in private and corporate funding. But the real estate industry has a real appetite for this.
Yeah.
And our board funded the initial seed.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So David Gao, who's the CEO of the Center for the Future of Houston, there, I was like, wow, he disappeared. So David, and one of the things that I want to make sure we pull through, David is ahead of us, right? Frankly, he's gotten started last year. And so, one of the things I'm really curious to know is, how you got people in, but then what's the governance moving forward? Because I think that's the important part to keeping these people engaged. So love to hear about what you're doing in Houston, and then Tim will come to you next, if you don't mind.
Great, thanks. Wonderful to be with all of you here. Yes, our initiative really got kicked off, incented, catalyzed at the Brain Economy Summit in Houston last May. Amy spoke. It was a really wonderful event. Harris and George pulled that off in Houston. It was a great event that kicked us off. And we began an effort called Project Metis. Metis is the Greek goddess of deep thought and wisdom. And Project Metis has this ambition to enhance brain health for the benefit of economic growth and human flourishing. So all the themes and initiatives and desires and objectives that everybody has here, we want to do in Houston. It's a place-based initiative. And really the most compelling part of what we're doing right now is that we've been able to pull together lots of the leading institutions across Houston, and this is what makes our opportunities so rich. We've got, as project chairs, Rice University. Amy is serving as one of our co-chairs. UTMB, you heard from Jochen Reiser. He's also a chair. We've got David Callender of Memorial Hermann. Many other wonderful medical institutions. MD Anderson and Methodist are on board. We also have some large corporations, such as BP, who is very strategic in this realm. So we brought together lots of the leading players across Houston to work collaboratively to make a mark in our geographic region. Now, wonderfully, that's the people. On the process, wonderfully, we have a precedent, which is that about 5-7 years ago, the Houston Chamber of Commerce really worked deliberately and brought together a whole community of people who were naturally competitors with each other, companies like Chevron and Shell, for the purpose of transitioning Houston from being an oil and gas town to being a leader in energy. And so there's a blueprint of bringing people together, collaborating, somewhat competitors coming together to collaborate for a greater good. And that's our path forward. So we're replicating that process, and it means we've got a steering team that includes lots of these leading entities. And then with the project being so big, we're bringing it down into 7 different working teams. And you can imagine our working teams, they include 3 teams that are delineated by where you are in your lifespan. So we've got one team on early development of the brain, a second on your workplace years. How do we design a brain-friendly workplace? What are the attributes of an environment that really fosters a healthy brain and high productivity? A third team called the Healthy Aging Team, where we work to stave off cognitive decline and make people productive and have better health spans. And then 4 teams that are independent of where you are in lifespan. One on measurement. We hope to measure both a community-wide brain health index, and we want to measure brain capital at the corporate level. We've got a team on innovation and commercialization. We want to take the best technologies and help them commercialize, innovate, and scale for impact. And we've got a team on marketing communications. Clearly, we've got a lot of work to do to get the message out and bring more people into the tent. So now we've got these working teams that are populated by the entities that are supporting us and backing us and serving at the chair level. So that's our effort, and that's our governance structure. The steering team will oversee the efforts of the working team. The steering team has blessed or ordained those working teams as the best work fronts, and will take the findings of those teams, report into the steering team, and then progress down the road. I guess lastly, one thing I'm so excited about as a place-based initiative is we have an opportunity to design the right steps and interventions, implement them in our partners in places like BP, in a corporation that's really willing to try new things, track results, and then share those results, communicate them broadly so that people can see the real impact taking place. So the way we're thinking about it now, and this is what's so special to be being here with so many of you, is we are going to work locally, but collaborate globally. And there's a wonderful community here, and we hope to collaborate with you on an ongoing basis.
Thank you so much, David. You know, and I like this idea of how you attract and then track and then spread. I think that's a really interesting framework. I'm going to welcome Tim Lash, who's the president of West Health. You know, and Tim led the effort to have a master plan on aging in California. And so what Tim always tells us as we're talking to him is he brings you back to this core idea of what are we playing for? What are we playing for? I think that's a Timism, if there ever was one. So I'd love to have Tim talk about the work in California, what we might pull from that. But before we turn it over to Tim, I think we all owe Tim just a big round of applause for pulling it off this whole week and giving us this opportunity. So thank you very much. I turn it over to you.
Great. Drew, it's been great to partner with you and Gallup and Gates and the rest of the partners with this space. It's critical. West Health really operates at the intersection of healthcare delivery, affordability, and aging, and that's probably best illustrated through some of the accelerator work that we've done. So we launched an accelerator with Northwestern, where we're integrating primary care and mental and behavioral health across the entire Chicagoland Northwestern system. Or our partnership with MGB in Boston, where we're hardwiring some geriatric protocols across every service line and every facility in the entire network. But about 8 years ago, we realized that our work would benefit from a broader, you used the term blueprint, Drew, and I think that's an appropriate term to use. And blueprints exist within blueprints. And so in California, we started an initiative called We Stand With Seniors that was 8 years ago around the gubernatorial election. And it was really to get a commitment to develop a multi-sector, or in the case in California, a master plan on aging. And today there are 21 states that have comprehensive blueprints in place, and 27 other states that are actively investing, and exploring the possibility of a plan. And that blueprint has been absolutely critical for us to make decisions on resource allocation and timing for investments in behavioral health, or the role of EMRs and technology or policy initiatives. And I thought what I would do is just share 2 lessons learned from the journey on the multi-sector plans across the country. The first, I think, which is absolutely critical, is the role of data. Right? And data cannot be used just as sort of a measurement and tracking tool. From the very beginning, data has to be built into the governance process itself. You have to have dashboards where the leaders can see the data and evaluate which initiatives are working and which initiatives are not working, right? And they have to track directly to the funding. The initiatives need to track to the funding and to the sustainability. And that's absolutely critical, because these blueprints cross all of the silos that exist within our discontinuous continuum, right, of brain health and healthcare and overall vitality. So data. And the second, I think, is while the strategy has to be diffuse and broad, the investments actually need to be quite focused, the initiatives themselves. And in fact, they should be, in our opinion, either one-time or time-limited, because the initiatives have to find a way to generate a return that supports them, right? Otherwise, one relies on public funding or philanthropy into perpetuity, and it's just not a sustainable model, and it's certainly not a sustainable model outside of the public sector, which is absolutely critical as we think about the need to have a blueprint. And there I'd like to offer an example. In health, and specifically for seniors, most admissions that are unplanned happen through the emergency department, and it is the last exit, let's say, on the highway before the toll road really starts to sort of kick in. For an employer, a typical MI can be $50,000 plus, right? So these are very expensive admissions. And so there we launched an initiative with the American College of Emergency Physicians, that's the professional society for emergency medicine, to develop accreditation at 3 levels, just like trauma, so that could change the administration of emergency care and avoid admissions whenever possible, and also address the entire person. Because when they're in front of you, there's an opportunity to do something. And since we have Chatham Health rules here, I'll share that when we initially met with ACEP, they looked at us and they said, our priority right now is ultrasound. And ultrasound was the priority because it had just gotten a code that allowed for physicians to bill for it, and so it made money. And this geriatric thing, it's closer to like a book club, so like cruise ship medicine. That's what they said. And we said okay, but started pushing it forward, really focused on the sustainability and the ROI. That it was going to be a time-limited investment. And today in the state of California, there's over 50 emergency departments that are accredited. Covers 70% of those admissions for individuals over 65. I believe there's 680, so let's just call it 700 accredited GEDs across to the country, and ACEP is now fully sustaining that, on their own dollar because it has a positive ROI for their organization. And so that's an example of a sort of a broad strategy and a blueprint, but a very targeted, time-limited or one-time investment.
Yeah, great examples. Thank you very much. Yeah, and so what I heard Tim introduce into this, which I think is really important, is that the pilot. A lot of times you hear, no more pilots, no more pilots, but the pilot being evaluated as if it can become a self-sustaining operation. I think that's a really important piece. So we've heard some really great local examples. And so what I'd love to do is just go to Fred Disterbeck for one comment here. I'm going to ask him a very specific question, but then we'll open it up to you guys for any comments or any thoughts that you think you should put on the table for how we think about what's the implementation of these place-based strategies. But Fred, the question for you, and Fred's the head of the European Brain Coalition, convenes an amazing group of people during UN General Assembly every year. Has been a fantastic partner in raising this issue globally. But as we've heard about these state and local initiatives, the question I think becomes, when you look at this regionally or internationally, there are places where you can go and demonstrate action, where you can get some scale if there's adoption. So I think of WHO, I think of the G7, the G20, and certainly there are others, but I would welcome your thoughts on what role they play as we do these place-based initiatives.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Drew, and thanks for the opportunity to contribute to the conversation. So, obviously, as EBC, we have a remit which is at a mezzo level, so a kind of a sub-regional in Europe, and one may wonder why we come to Davos or why we travel to New York on a yearly basis now to organize these big meetings during UNGA. And that's actually because of the multi-layered and the very complex level of interactions and finding the right levers to create the change and create the impact. EBC exists for now something like 25 years. We were established to promote brain research at European level, and basically, if I'd like to summarize, is having more funding opportunities for researchers in Europe in the brain space, where the brain was completely ignored as compared to cancer, cardiovascular, and diabetes. Not to say that these fields are not important, but just to say that our space, as we are all aware, deserves a greater prioritization. And this has forced us to kind of reinvent the narrative on a permanent basis. Hence, the reason why we have entered the brain economy agenda with such passion, but also realizing that if we want to be impactful in an area like the EU, we cannot work on it in isolation. And there is the work of trying to create awareness with EU decision makers, but that means working at the country level, working with ministers of health, ministers of finances, and entire governments for them to realize the importance of those issues. And it has kind of prompted us to then be active at a world level. First, because we were mandated by the European Commission to do so, generating a European agenda on the priorities for neuroscience, brain health, and brain research at the European level. But we had a mandate to then share that in an international setting, international space. So this is how and why we hit New York for the first time, right after the COVID lockdown, having a relatively small workshop for a couple of hours in an afternoon in New York. And now it has really transformed into a 2-day annual event where we are gathering up to 300 people and lead expert scientists, each sharing their expertise, their know-how, but also their achievements, because we are really in the transformation of this saying of thinking globally and acting locally. And we are probably in that level of interaction as to how to nurture the positive cycle of this kind of thinking between like strategizing and being impactful. And the, let's say, number of settings and opportunities for engagement have really gone on the rise with obviously WEF and the collaboration with DAC, but also then the G7, and we are, I think, all hopeful to see France taking up the agenda vividly. We know that with the US coming after, it's very likely to be an issue. Know that we are all aware of the exchange of SMS between Macron and Trump. It's making things even more interesting. But I would say, no, we are coming to a stage, and that's probably a transition as a way of hope in this, a word of hope in this very complex geopolitical momentum. I think we definitely need to demonstrate how collaboration at international level actually pays off, and how this exchange of knowledge, good practice, should be a source of inspiration rather than a source of competition. And on that note, EBC continues on its mandate, because now we have the start of what is the biggest multi-country transnational support for brain health and brain research, starting from Europe on the 1st of January this year, which is called the European Partnership for Brain Health. And in that context, EBC has a mandate to really nurture this international dialogue, looking at ways for collaboration, and also promote science diplomacy with those countries that have not engaged yet. So definitely, we hope to be activating this dialogue even more in the future.
That's awesome. Quick question, and then I'll open it up for comments or questions. So, so Tim brought up this idea of data collection, making data-driven decisions. When you think of these, international or regional frameworks, how can they help with the data collection or data dissemination? Any thoughts?
Well, a big component of what we are up to in the context of the partnership is really to generate infra and info structures for researchers. So obviously, data collection is an obvious need, but the principle is really to try and create. Someone mentioned the snowball effect, pun intended, in Davos, but it's to create this opportunity for seed funding by governments and national funding institutions, so that we attract more funders and we leverage a kind of bigger effort into the space. But if we have public investors targeting this and targeting those, I would even call pain points in the system, but that we transform into opportunities, that's definitely where we need to prioritize work.
Great, thank you. Comments, questions, thoughts? Harris, are you coming up because you have a comment or a question or a thought?
Well, I was thinking that we should next briefly talk about culture and arts and the humanities, because we've talked a lot about quantitation, which is very important, but we have people here from the humanities and also from, say, for example, First Nations communities. If Cheryl's comfortable, I'd love to hear her to share the story about the Australian First Nations context, and then others talk about arts and culture. Steve Carnivale's been thinking about this, but many of you have, but maybe Cheryl can kick us off with some inspiration.
Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl Batchelor. I'm from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, and I'm really happy to be here. I started an Indigenous corporation back in 2019 when I reached out to Harris and Diane about that I was very distressed at a social level of the amount of children that were being excluded and suspended from school in our youth justice systems. In Queensland, we lock kids up from 10-year-olds. And there's more children's prisons than there are adult prisons. And so from a social impact and humanity perspective, I felt that we needed to do something different, and I believed that the brain is the way that we needed to focus on. So I started looking at brain health and healing, and Yili Opinya is what I set up, and Yili Opinya means brain from my mob. So over these last few years, I've gone out to country and I've listened. So what I've heard a lot about is us here creating the systems here, but what we tend to do in Australia is take things from a very cultural perspective, using self-determination by asking the community, what do you need? What do you want to know about your brain? And from those conversations, specifically if you do them under a tree, they'll tell you the stories of spirituality and having spiritual resilience. So in that spiritual resilience comes from the wind, the land, the sea. And when I was in country up in Northern Territory, I was speaking to some women that English was their third language. And the other three languages were not Australian or American or German or anything like that. It was a dialogue that had been around for hundreds of years. And they wanted to know more about the brain. But before then, I said, we actually have to understand what a brain is to them, because in their country, in their mind, they didn't have a word for brain. It was all about spirituality. There was no word for mental. It was all about my spirit is sick. So when I go in country and we're talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, my spirit is sick, I'm sick. So we have to change the conversation from some of these big words that we use and say, what do you need? How can we make that relate to you? So these women, after an hour of arguing, and I had no idea what they were talking about, but anyway, they end up coming up with a word that they use their three different languages, different phonics from those, and came up with a word for brain that they all agreed on. So there was a common language that we started from in talking about what does a healthy brain mean. And the healthy brain means that my land and my country has to be healthy for me to be healthy. The soil, the wind, am I taking care of my land? Because if the land is not happy and healthy, then I'm not going to be happy and healthy. means that the food that I'm going to eat is not going to be happy and healthy either. So very much spiritually connected. And I was with a conversation yesterday about spirituality and the brain. And we know there's neural circuitries in the brain for that. But I just think we just need to talk more about that. So there's 3 particular pillars in yearly opinion that we work with. One is 0 to 8. We teach parents about brain development in play groups. Now in Australia, the word deadly means really good. So when I say grow deadly brains, it means it's a good brain, not one that's going to die. Okay, so deadly means really good. The other thing we did is we wrote a curriculum about understanding your brain that we deliver in the youth detention centres. So we go in there and teach kids about their brain and say your brain was having a bad day when things happened. What can you learn about it so that you can talk back to it and make some changes? So those people that do understand English, you know what the kids call me in detention? Please excuse my language, but the deadly brains bitch. Because they love learning about their brain, so they want to know more. So you need to get the kids excited about this. One of the other things we do is in education. We do brain health screening. Now let's think about this. We do a lot of screening for literacy, numeracy, reading skills, etc., but we don't do screening for cognition. So we developed a brain health screener. We still got to tweak it so it's more culturally appropriate because different cultures, I mean, we have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, but there's much diversity in that. So within that, we do brain health screening at the school. So from an individual level, a school level, the staff of the school can see how cognitively the school is going. And what we have noticed is that children in years 3 are pretty good with their working memory. And then 2 years later, goes downhill. So there's this big gap between what we're doing in our teaching pedagogy between years 3 and 5 that's affecting cognitive health. So what does that mean? Behaviour goes up. It means that teachers start saying, I think this kid's got autism or ADHD or some other thing, so a parent feels obliged to go to a doctor to seek support because the kids are struggling at school. So what I'm saying here is that the brain health economy things is that it's very actionable on the ground when we walk out of here today by just starting at schools. Let's teach kids about their brains and then do brain health screening for the staff. So we've done brain health screening for the workforce in education centres in Australia and New Zealand. And a little bit like JLL was talking before, we've done a 12-week program of improving cognitive health for teachers and found better outcomes for kids. So it's there. We know what to do. We've already got it there. The next part is the 7 to 17-year-olds that are not going to school in child safety. For some silly reason in Australia, we decide, particularly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island children, take the children away from their parents and lock them up in a house. And these children are also in the youth justice system. So we have a very high criminal activity in the youth justice system in Australia, and that's why we create more prisons, apparently. So imagine that. The cost of one child in a residential care is $2 million a year. So just by teaching brain health and responding to that in that system alone will save the government heaps of money. So there's pockets of opportunity everywhere. Yep. I'm an adjunct professor at Queensland University of Technology, and we're doing randomised controlled trials and everything that I'm talking about. We need to show the evidence because people think that we just need to do a 10-week program or learn about the brain and everything's honky-dory, where it can't be that way.
Yep.
We actually need to show the evidence that things are different. So I hope that makes sense.
These are absolutely great points. It made a ton of sense. Thank you so much. And I think it pulls some of the themes we've heard out in another way. And it really emphasizes this idea that there needs to be a life course of lens put to this work. The other thing that I learned was that if you call somebody a deadly bitch in Australia, that's a good thing. So that's interesting to me, and it actually is a nice bridge.
I have a
It's
male version for you.
I don't think I think we pushed the envelope already. So Steve's going to save us here. But you know what this deadly bitch concept brings up is that there's a need to make sure that there's a bridge that makes sense as you translate regions and translate geographies. And Steve, I know you spent a lot of time down at the TPC house here while you've been in Davos and thinking through exactly what that looks like. What's the east to west bridge? So I'd love for you to make some comments and get me off the hook here.
Wow, I always love finding out I have an opportunity to speak when I didn't know that was created. Don't you love the way Harris manages to move the Australian culture subtly into the rest of the world? We're part. My venture firm, Blue Ash Ventures, is partnered with TPC and Fred Sau, and they're really. Fred's been a leader as a business magnate in talking very openly about the importance of love and consciousness shifting, and really deeply embedded in the ancient wisdoms and practices that are very common in the East, but are not so commonly embraced in the West, although I think there is a growing movement of people I meet in the West who are embracing these more. We heard a little bit about that with the Blue Zone conversation a couple hours ago. But I think the intersection for me is with the neuroscience is that the evolving thinking is that consciousness is really tapping into a vibrational frequency that we are not fully recognizing, and that vibrational frequency ties right back into music and in the arts. And that's why, if you think about it, probably early when man first emerged, they were singing before they were talking. So there's a lot there to unpack. And for me, the thing I talked to Fred about is that to build an east-west bridge, what we have to do is we have to build the science that underscores the contemplative practices, and that's what we're in the process of doing. There are a bunch of people around the world who are very interested in this. There's one guy, for example, I work with at Columbia University, Martin Picard, who works on mitochondria, which is the energy source in the cells, and translating that to actually being able to measure it and then connect that to the body, mind, and it connects all the way back to contemplative practices. So some of you undoubtedly think this is kind of crazy and out there, and others of you, like me, perhaps are practitioners of contemplative practices and believe this is possible. And I think contained in this room and in our broader brain capital population, we have the opportunity to unlock an entirely new science that has been eluding, let's call it the traditional Western medicine healthcare system.
Thank you, Steve. You passed the pop quiz with flying colors here. So, yeah, that was deadly. So we're going to go to Helen, and we maybe have time for one or two more comments, and then we're going to wrap it up.
I'm Helen Lavretsky. I'm a professor of psychiatry, geriatric psychiatrist at UCLA. This is an amazing gathering. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Announcing the next Brain Health Summit at UCLA, March 20th, 21st. And I'm that neuroscientist who studies spirituality and brain. I also wrote books on resilience and aging, and most recently on Living from the Soul, the Neuroscience of Spiritual Awakening, that is coming out by Simon & Schuster in July. But the issue here, I'm a geriatric psychiatrist, I had to arrive to the point of understanding that we have to start in utero, trying to prevent dementia later on in life. And then I discovered that there's no common language between neurodevelopment and neurodegeneration, aging and childhood. And that's the issue here of how do we measure, how do we establish a conversation and understand each other and establish the same practices and standards so that we could track brain health throughout the lifespan, basically. And that's where we're at. And the summit at UCLA will establish this conversation. The other thing is, as you pointed out, neuroscience is not community. You can do things that are possible at the university, like brain imaging and all the biomarkers and knowing what Alzheimer's is and where brain is, to the community. And that's where knowledge of culture and spirituality comes in. Throughout my many years of practice, I found that spirituality is a very common tool. People open up, and it can serve as a conversation access to the population you're working with. When they can't understand your neuroscience talk, they will understand your spiritual talk. And it can help build resilience. My studies show that spiritual practices like yoga, meditation, tai chi grow brain cells, and they reduce inflammation, and they reduce aging, reverse aging practices. So we could use neuroscience to document what these practices can do. So I think it's about time to come together and create a collective and establish this common conversation, common language. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I think we can wrap it up. I just wanted to say a couple things in closing here, and a lot of it's echoing what we've heard today and yesterday. Lucy Perez with McKinsey, who helped write the report that is launching the Brain Economy report, and also the stimuli behind the Global Brain Economy Initiative. She said in her closing remarks that brain capital is as important as physical capital, and we need to treat it that way. I think that's a really important thing, and not only does it make it simple, it's repeatable, but it also has some urgency. So the number two thing that I think is important is that we've heard kind of when you see a system, whether it's a healthcare system or whatever, when you see a system, you've seen one system. And I actually think we need to test that. I think there are unique aspects to systems, but I think if we're really going to get to a point where we can scale this at pace, that we're going to need to find archetypes of systems. And so we shouldn't just say, well, we did it there once and you can't do it again there because it's a different system. Because we'll never reach launch speed if that's the case. The third piece is that I just want to really commend Harris for how he closed one of the sessions by saying the Global Brain Economy Initiative is a platform for action. And there is so much action. You've heard it, right? And so what we really need to do is just have this global initiative become a repository for what good looks like, so that makes taking action easier. So as we move forward, I thought Helen's hit a really important point, is there's going to be a lot of opportunities. UCLA with their conference in the spring is one of them. Harris was able to talk to the Lieutenant Governor of Texas yesterday. As you guys know, the G20 will be hosted by the U.S. This year. And so there is interest from the Lieutenant Governor in doing something around the G20 in Texas where we could really kind of build on this and showcase it to the G20, which is where a lot of the attention and interest is, because some of the fastest growing economies are in the G20 rather than the G7. So I think an important point to that, underline that, is that we need to continue to work together, and a lot of this work needs to be done face to face. So we need to find a way to get together. And then when we come back here to the World Economic Forum in Davos next year, we hope to be able to share with you a blueprint, and that blueprint should represent what we all see as the vision, what we all see as the strategy, and what we think are the shared actions with the underlying measurements. And then what's the mechanism for accountability? And I think if we're able to get through that this year, then we really have launched something here today and this week. So thank you all for your time and your expertise. I'm going to turn it over to Harris to close this out.
So Drew and I thought we don't have to leave until 2, so we want to leave you like literally half an hour to talk to each other. But I want to say that we all need to collectively express massive gratitude to Drew, the High Lantern Group, and then a couple of other firms that have given, I would say, about like a lot, 10 million in pro bono support to us to get to this point. So thank you, Drew. Thank you, McKinsey Health Institute. Thank you, Milken. Also, the brain economy is significantly powered by a very generous philanthropist in Houston, Texas, called Harry Yan, and his wife Wayman Gao. And so I think we should acknowledge that they are the first ones to back this with, you know, 7-figure sums with Rice University. So thank you to Harry and Wayman. And then I would say, you know, we need to keep pushing this, you know, fast, you know, scientific, credible. And so there are a lot of funders in the room. So we want to take this to the next level. So anyone that, if this piques people's interest, corporates, families, foundations, we'd love to talk to you, because we have a plan. And I can think you can tell that we're really working hard for impact. And so we welcome those conversations throughout the rest of Davos and afterwards. So thank you so much, otherwise, everyone, for coming. And now let's talk and you know, try to get some trips to different parts of the world that interest you. Australia, Great Barrier Reef, Barcelona, you know, Nairobi, wherever you want to go. So let's enjoy the next half hour of getting to know each other.